All right. So hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. We're excited to have you here with us. Just wanted to do a couple housekeeping items while we give people a couple minutes to join in. Since we do have a good bit to cover, we're going to hold questions to the end. We hope to have 10 or 15 minutes then to review any questions that we get and kind of go over them. But please go ahead and throw those into the chat as we move along, so they're queued up and ready for us to review there at the end. I've got a couple events coming up this month for Huntress. One is the ASCII SMB IT Success Summit in Cincinnati. We'll be there physically, also at the IT Nation Secure in Orlando. And that's the ASCII Summit's June 16th, 17th. The IT Nation Secure is the 21st and through the 23rd. And so if you happen to be physically at those events, feel free to jump by or stop by the booth and check us out. And then Tiffany, do you have anything going on?
Absolutely. So at HacWare on Friday, on June the 25th, we do a Twitch live stream. So we teach you how to build resilient scripts, code secure training. So join us on Twitch TV/HacWare to get the free secure coding on Fridays.
That's cool. It's cool. Yeah, and we also have a Tradecraft Tuesday on the second Tuesday of every month, where we really kind of go into the tradecraft of hacking, and it's a really interesting, very, very interesting hour usually. So definitely check that out too when you get a chance. So we're about a minute past the hour. We're going to go ahead. Let's just go ahead and get into redefining your stack. So today's agenda, we're going to look at today's threat landscape. We're going to go through an overview of NIST and CIS. We're going to look at the core components of a strong security stack, the need for layered security, and then we're going to wrap that up with how to tailor the security conversation to win clients over. And my name is Shane. I'm a security engineer with Huntress. And for the most part, I'm doing partner education, partner enablement, and also helping out with deployments, things of that nature here. Before that, I had about 18 years in the MSP space. And I was with an MSP that grew from about a $3 million a year business to a $65 million a year business. So I've seen really the growth cycle there of an MSP from a small one to a large one. Spent many years really going through developing a security stack, not only internally for that MSP, but also for our clients. And so I continue to do that today. So Tiffany, tell us about yourself.
Absolutely. I'm happy to be here. Thank you all for having me. I'm Tiffany Ricks. I'm the founder and CEO at HacWare. At HacWare, we help you build security awareness training that's automated. And prior to HacWare, I worked for the Department of Defense. So I was in software engineering, moved into security engineering, then led red team operations as an ethical hacker for the United States Air Force and for the Navy. Left that, started an MSP where we work with companies from the micro size all the way up to Fortune 500 companies. And I have over 15 years of experience in software and cybersecurity, and I'm super excited to be here. So thanks for having me.
Cool. Tiffany's been busy. So let's talk about the threat landscape. Let's set the stage here. We have some stats that we want to take a look at. So 28% of attacks involve small businesses. This shows that it's certainly a problem for all, not just the big guys. 83% of attacks are financially motivated. This shows that ransomware is a business that looks for repeatability these days. 57% of attacks against SMBs involve social engineering, and that really shows that attacks are they're crafted to be effective. And 69% of attacks are bypassing current tools, and this shows that we still have gaps that can be addressed in our stacks. And really, between the 288 days of downtime and $500,000 in cost, it really shows how damaging these attacks can be, especially to small businesses. Right, Tiffany?
Absolutely. It's sort of almost a death sentence for small businesses once they get into a cybersecurity incident. And in fact, 60% of small businesses fail after a cybersecurity attack. And it usually happens within 6 months of that attack. So Shane, explain why this is happening so often.
Absolutely. So really, there's two key dynamics at play. Small businesses really represent 99% of the U.S. economy. Most often, they just don't have the budget for robust security, and therefore they're just a primary target for hackers. Hackers target SMBs because it's easy money. The smaller the business is, the less likely it is to have adequate cyber defenses. And in most cases, hackers they're not targeting specific business types in particular. They're just exploiting vulnerabilities and using that to their advantage. It just so happens that smaller businesses are less likely to have robust security training to spot phishing emails, or they have less time in their day to focus on making patches or getting their patches up to date. And they're not really doing threat hunting because, they're really focused on running their core business. And two, cybercrime market is hot. More players are getting involved every day, and they're growing their skill sets to capitalize on this. And despite our best efforts, hackers are constantly learning and finding new ways in, sometimes by using some tried and true methods. And, cryptocurrency has really given them a payment method that is harder to trace. And currently, we have fewer government controls in place around that. So let's take a look at a typical attacker journey. And usually the first step is reconnaissance, right? When attackers look to gather all necessary information to find their entry point. A common tactic during reconnaissance is to gather employee email addresses and social media accounts. This information is useful if the attacker decides to use social engineering to access the network. And then the break-in comes, right? There are many different ways an attacker can gain initial access to their target. But usually we see this done through exploiting vulnerabilities like RDP hacking, zero-day exploits, more commonly through phishing, getting a user to click on a link that they shouldn't click on, right, in an email. So it turns out people just like to click on things. I think, Tiffany, you guys specialize in training around that, right?
Absolutely. And I spent my career as an ethical hacker performing this attacker journey as an ethical hacker. And what you mentioned, it brings back memories. And, bad actors, they're looking for the path to least resistance. And phishing is, that easy way for bad actors to get in and bypass complex security measures. I really want to talk more about how they bypass email security and endpoint detection solutions. And there's the three ways. In the modern attack journey with regard to phishing, there are three ways that I see bad actors penetrating environments. The first one is direct communication. So they know in email security solutions are taking those links away. They are removing them out, or they are scanning those resources. And so they can't use that link oftentimes to try to download malware onto machines. Or the attachments are quarantined. And so they can't get to the user that way. And so the only thing that's left open is direct communication. And what we're seeing in these phishing emails is they are using urgency, but they also have a phone number. And so in that phone number, they're trying to lure those employees to call the number, verify information, and now they have access to that proprietary sensitive information. The other way is through business email compromise scams. So someone in their network has been compromised and the bad actor has taken over their email. Now the bad actor can send that user an email, the user doesn't know, and now they're sending attachments, proprietary data to this bad actor. And that's one way that we see happening in modern attacks. The second way, which has been, it's getting more and more common, is link obfuscation. And so bad actors are using various sites to hide their links. They're hosting their malicious content on Firebase servers and on Google Forms and Office 365 forms. We've seen an escalation in the last 30 days where the Nobelum crime group, it's a Russian cyber gang, they are using Constant Contact to hide their links. And so what Constant Contact does, they have links, they have their own links that replace yours so they can handle the analytics of when a user opens it. The crime group now is using these sites to hide their links. So when you hover, you aren't able to detect that it's a malicious link. And so we see that continuing to grow in the threat community. And then the last and final modern phishing attack, and this is a part of what Shane was mentioning earlier with the reconnaissance, we see them using data, and it could be through manual scraping or through artificial intelligence. And so they're looking at three types of data that I see. They're looking at life events. So on LinkedIn, you may get a promotion, or you may be a part of a new organization, and so they're using that as an opportunity to come in and send a phishing scam. The other change we see is when a company changes. So a company may have a merger, or they may have a new partnership that they announced. Oh, this is a great time for bad actors to send an email. You aren't aware of what's going on because there's so much change in the organization. And this is how they lure users in with their tactics. And then one thing I just want to mention is credential stuffing. So we see a lot of these scams come across where a password is being reused and they're able to get in to another part of the supply chain just by reusing passwords. And so Shane, tell me, what happens after that initial access?
Absolutely. So after attackers gain that initial access, their top priority is usually to establish persistence. This is where attackers silently establish a foothold to maintain their access across things like restarts, reboots, or other interruptions like a user log on or user log off. And some common tactics here include abusing auto runs or trusted parts of the operating system to silently retain control over that device and continue surveying the environment. If they lose that foothold, it breaks their attack chain, and they tend to move on to other lower hanging fruit elsewhere. But really, once persistence is successfully established, the rest is just a matter of time. They'll move on into development, and as attackers dwell in that environment, they use that time to develop the perfect exploit from all the information they've gathered. Some actions during this stage are installing necessary tools, modifying security certificates, creating script files. We're looking for further vulnerabilities to get a better foothold, like a backdoor to their backdoor, other options, before starting their main attack. And keeping the present secret is critical for attackers, right? Hackers will typically wipe files and metadata, overwrite data with timestamps, and sometimes modify documents to remain undetected. And then you have, it's go time, execution. The last step is really when attackers take action to fulfill the attack's purpose. And, it's usually what we hear about in the news, but objectives vary. Most common goals are either encryption of data, exfiltration of data, for ransom, or data destruction if it's a non-financially motivated type of attack. And so let's talk a little bit about frameworks, because frameworks can be a great way to help you communicate the importance of a layered security approach to your clients. And so let's delve into that a bit. And the first framework you really should get to know is NIST. And what we should be doing is creating policies from something like NIST, and then mapping behaviors and products to the necessary controls at each layer. And take a look at all the things that we should be doing here, and it's a lot, right? Only about the top 1% of companies have budget to do all these things. So we tend to have to pick and choose what's effective for our desired budget. And as part of my job, I speak with customers every day, and usually I see a cybersecurity stack that looks like this, right? Where most of the budget is either spent over on protective and preventive measures like AV and firewalls, and recovery measures like backup and disaster recovery solutions. And there's generally this gap in detect and respond. And really the reason that we have that is because, operating in detect and respond really requires proper security knowledge, and it's difficult right now because we have a global shortage of this talent pool, really it's about the tune of 3.5 million jobs. So it's pretty crazy, right? So it's expensive. It's either if you're outsourcing or insourcing it, but really it doesn't change the fact that there is this huge gaping hole, right? And so in NIST, as we move left to right here, most security software tools are preventative in nature, and they exist in identify and protect. But post-prevention is just as important. So we need to minimize or eliminate blind spots to threats that have eluded our prevention tools. As you move here left to right, you become less dependent on software solutions and more dependent on human resources to be able to effectively stop an attacker.
Great job. I definitely understand why MSPs are using CIS, but I also want to talk about using this. I also want to talk about CIS. And so CIS it was created by the Center of Internet Security, and they came out with the top 20 critical controls. That's version 7. I see many MSPs use this framework because it's a priority-based framework. And they organize all of their controls into three categories: basic, foundational, and organizational. Before I talk about where I see many of the MSPs, where they are, I want to talk about a recent update with sys controls. So if we go to the next slide, Shane, on May the 18th, so in the last month or so, the Center for Internet Security released version 8. And what they did with version 8 is they really looked at, okay, how can we help IT professionals, security professionals understand what are the critical things that they need to focus on now? Because the market, the cybercrime is always evolving. The way that we work now has changed. We're doing a lot of remote work. More work is moving to the cloud. And so on May the 18th, they consolidated the 20 controls into 18. And one of the things I want to point out is they moved data privacy from the foundational level internet group, they moved it up to basic. And that's because we need to make sure that we are protecting our data. It is no longer something that can wait. This should be a part of all basic cybersecurity stacks. And then the other thing they did was they combined some of the admin and asset protection controls. They combined those. And so now there are 18. Can we go to the next slide? And I'll tell you more about how MSPs, I see how they're using SIS. I see some of the users, some of the internet providers, they sometimes get a little too busy and they stay in that basic layer. And this framework is just a framework. The framework is designed to help you understand what are the top 20 to 18 controls. These are all critical. They want you to implement them all. And we see some who stay in that basic layer. When you only stay in that basic layer, you're opening up your organization and your clients to a compromise. Because as I stated before, at that organizational level, many partners forget and they just don't have the time to allocate and devote educating that human layer. And that's where 90% of breaches happen, on that organizational layer. And then also with access. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about redefining our stack, that we look at how can we set up a stack that addresses all 18 to 20 critical issues. So let's go to the next slide, Shane.
Sure. And so as you've heard from both Tiffany and myself about both NIST and CIS, what we're both seeing is there's these gaps, right? And why are those gaps so dangerous is really what we want to talk about here. And, malicious actors will adapt and find those gaps in security. They're constantly evolving their strategy to get around preventative measures. And, it's always a cat and mouse type of game. So once a compromise occurs, they will shift efforts to remaining undetected while they prepare the payload. And hacking is no longer simply a way for individuals to be disruptive. Because of cryptocurrency and the rise of ransomware, as we've said, it's a business and it seeks to gain recurring revenue just like your MSP. And because of this reality, just as defenders have been banding together to stop attackers and share knowledge, the same thing is happening in the hacker community on Red Team now. And I think, Tiffany, you had some information about some cyber gang activity.
Absolutely. So as you mentioned, cyber gangs are big business. Cyber gangs like DarkSide, they are hired. And as we saw with DarkSide, they were hired to take down the Colonial Pipeline, which caused the impact on us with regard to fuel. But just a little bit more about the business side. DarkSide and other cybersecurity gangs, they have affiliate programs. So they give perks to individuals and organizations that help them download malware and help them push their agenda across. I've seen percentages like 10 to 15% of the ransom they will give to their affiliates. So this is big business. We have to really, stay vigilant in understanding what our gaps are. And Shane, tell us a little bit more about what you're seeing from, from a ransomware track, like what's going on in that space.
Sure. So CoverWare is actually a blog that tracks ransomware info so that companies can be informed and kind of better protect themselves based on data that they've been collecting on these attacks. And we're still seeing that RDP and phishing are still, really the top vectors. In 2021, we're also seeing a lot more software exploits from vulnerabilities. And attackers are also sharing that information, right? We've seen in the news SolarWinds, Exchange, recently VMware vCenter vulnerabilities that were all critical. And on the hardware front, we're also seeing some things with firewall devices like Fortinet, and where bad actors could manipulate a vulnerability to basically capture username and passwords for VPN users and use that as an entry point, right? So, and one of the other things they're doing is also compromising these. Again, as Tiffany was saying, they're acting as gangs, and that once these things are compromised, they share that data on the dark web with affiliates. So, and it's also important here to see that, smaller businesses still have a lot of low-hanging fruit out there. 80% still being RDP compromised, which is, it's interesting to me. In 2021, we still have open RDP to the internet, but obviously it's a problem still, right? And as you go up market, things give way to more phishing tactics. And it's just an example of attackers adjusting to the various vulnerabilities of each type of business, right? The hacker specialty is really adapting and overcoming, and that's why we also have to do the same thing. And so how do we solve that problem, right? Today, we want to focus on three main areas: investment in layers, an offensive and defensive mindset, and the human element of cybersecurity. And so it's important for MSPs to create an effective cybersecurity stack that understands the attack surface is really multidimensional and build a strategy around how to address that. The best approach is a layered approach with solutions for each of those NIST layers or sys controls. And you want to look for solutions that are easier to implement and maintain. Solutions that require constant tuning tend to just get dialed down because they're too noisy, and you lose functionality and value, right? As MSPs, you probably already have RMM tools to help you manage your client environments, and also make sure you're using them effectively, doing things like logging security related events or automating restarts of security services, logging AD account creation. Those types of things can be very effective at being early warning indicators, right, of an attack. And so speak to your RMM support on best practices there for whatever security product you guys, whatever RMM product you guys are using. And an offensively minded approach will assume compromise and work to prove otherwise, right? This is a key perspective that is often overlooked, as defensive products have been on the market for just a much longer time. Everyone's accustomed to those, but it's really necessary that we begin focusing on offense as well. And so security awareness training is a great way to take an offensive approach on the end user side. The organization's behavior or cybersecurity posture, if poor, really could undermine the most comprehensive security stack. The organization should build a system that trains users continuously. And you should also look for solutions that take an offensive stance and do true threat hunting as well in the environment, not just with software, but with people. And Tiffany, I know you guys do some training, so I'll let you speak to that.
Absolutely. So yeah, we love security awareness training. We feel like that's a great way to, get a return on, your cybersecurity endeavors. And so the thing that I want to just highlight is, with security awareness, it has to be continuous in this threat landscape. It has to be continuous, and it has to be targeted to the end user's role. And what we do at HacWare is we believe that it should be on a 21-day cadence. We definitely, if you can't do 21 days, try to at least do them monthly or quarterly, but just that an annual security refresher in this market is a gap. And again, you have to think about the role. So the way that you would set up your security training for your engineering team is a little different than the way that you would set it up for, accounts receivable. Engineering, they need to understand secure coding practices, and with accounts receivable, they need to have, money laundering and fraud and invoicing, all of those threats. They need to understand how to protect themselves and their company from those crimes. And so, Shane, tell me a little bit more about how do we solve this human element?
Sure. So, speaking of people, like let's talk about that human element. I mean, the term antivirus was coined by Fred Cohen in 1983. And then prophetically, 4 years later, he wrote this quote, right? There is no algorithm that can perfectly detect all possible computer viruses. And this is something that was true then, it's still true today, right? True threat hunting requires humans. Humans are creative creatures. There's no AI currently available that will match human intelligence and creative problem solving. You have to counter human creativity on red team with the same creativity on blue team to be successful. And because bad actors now attempt to hide within the OS itself and maintain those long dwell times, we have to observe behavior of systems and processes and make really complicated decisions on whether this activity is within typical parameters or not. And not only is that human element important in this threat hunting process, like we're talking about, but it's equally important in that training of employees that Tiffany was mentioning, because really they're the first line of defense on many attacks. And so how do we take all this information and that we've been discussing and kind of turn it into a stack, right? How do we build that stack? Well, this is an example of a strong security stack that has solutions that really exist on all layers of NIST, right? It's generic on purpose. We're not really here to tell you to buy X or Y product today, but we want to inform you about the types of solutions needed and how to think about choosing partners and products. So this makes for a really good tabletop exercise that your organization internally, you can get together and map the solutions you're currently using to this list and see, where your gaps are, right? And then you can also turn that around and do that with your clients. And maybe that'll get them thinking about what they're doing for their security and see the gaps and see where it's necessary that they may need to adjust their tactics there. And so, of course, your solution should cover all the layers we talked about, either from NIST or CIS. Have solutions that are multi-vendor because of indicators of compromise. And like indicators of compromise are that database that we use to help determine if something is malicious or not. And a single vendor may provide better management interface, like that single pane of glass that we all like, but rarely are they going to be more comprehensive than a multi-vendor strategy. Like, do your homework, verify that the tools you're using are actually utilizing different IOCs in order to really cast a wider net against attacks. And as you're partnering with organizations for these products, make sure that those partners are willing to get skin in the game with you. Will they co-host webinars or lunch and learns and help to co-promote you? Maybe they're not physically close, but Zoom obviously works, right? So choose partners that have effective support systems and are reachable.
And as a previous MSP owner, I think we should also think about, when we're thinking about our stack, let's think about our resources. Let's think about our people and think about, from a business standpoint, can we maintain this stack? And so there are 5 questions that I want you to consider when you're thinking about a stack and redefining it. The first one is, how much downtime is it going to cause our organization or our client's organization to implement this solution? Is this something, and then if it's going to take, quite a bit of downtime, when can we possibly fit this in? So that's the first thing. The second thing I want you to consider is, your team. How much time is it going to require my team to maintain this over the life of the product? Is it a daily commitment, monthly commitment? How much time is it going to cost from a labor standpoint? And then the third question is, does my team have the skills? Does my team have the skills, or is it going to require additional training? Do they have to get a certification to maintain this stack? If my team leaves, are we going to continue to be able to run this stack, because now there's a skills gap? And then the fourth thing I want you to consider is culture of your organization and your client's organization. And so this has to do with the success rate of your stack. Does this product work within our client's culture, or is it going to require them to totally change how they operate? If it requires a total change and it isn't a incremental change, the success rate of that solution is going to be pretty low. So you got to think about, the culture of your clients. And then the fourth thing is automation. Really look at, because teams are lean, and many of the MSP partners that we work with, they operate with a lean team. And so resources are finite, but you can really utilize technology and automation to allow your team to do more, or focus, use their resources elsewhere. And so look for solutions that really try to free up your team. And when I talk about, security awareness training, and I know some of you all were thinking security awareness training that's personalized for 21 days, that is a lot of work, and it is a lot of work, but try to find a solution that automates, some of those important things. It automates, though, you can automate those tasks for you. So it's more seamless. And so those are the top 5 things I believe you all should, review as you're considering redefining your cybersecurity stack. Shane, tell me what's next.
All right, so realistically, we can do all these great things and put together a great security stack, but if we can't really, get our clients to buy into that stack, it's pretty pointless, right? So we have to be able to, and part of the reason we're here today is just to equip you guys with the ability to speak to the needs, right, and to the stack and how to build these things out and why. And so as for client engagement, a few tips for keeping clients and security top of mind. Really, first off, education is key. Clients simply don't know what they don't know, right? And when you're educating them, you can stay away from scare tactics, but still be informative with facts, right? And HacWare is a great blog with many useful bits of information about that. And you can use some recent attacks that are in the news. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you're ready to discuss what you've done to prevent that sort of attack with your stack and in your client base, right? Downtime calculators are really a good way to give some tangible meaning to the cost of a cyber attack. We actually have one on the Huntress site at huntress.com/downtime. And, use your other vendors and partners to help educate your customers on security through various activities like lunch and learns or email campaigns. Keep it at a regular cadence. And it really helps to keep that security conversation top of mind, and really hearing it from multiple angles or multiple sources really does, lend some credibility to it.
Absolutely. And the thing that I want to mention is cybersecurity for small businesses and many businesses is a hard topic to grasp. It seems super technical. It seems scary. And, I think one of the ways that when you talk about client engagement and selling cybersecurity services, you have to communicate in a language that they understand. Oftentimes they understand loss and losing of resources and things that they care about. And so really try to think about how can I, create or give a report that talks about the impact. So if there is a breach, what could this cost my organization? Instead of talking about, the cybersecurity stack and monitoring and all this stuff, sometimes it is just so overwhelming. But if you could talk about, their critical needs and what they care about, and if we don't do something here on the cybersecurity side, you could lose X, Y, and Z. And so really think about impact reporting. HacWare, we have a reporting that talks about, the cost. So if you have a phishing attack and these are the behaviors and this is what it could cost. So really try to look at when you're talking to your clients and you want to keep them engaged, they want to talk about, okay, how is this going to affect me? What is the impact? And so Shane mentioned downtime calculators. I think that's a great way to try to communicate this super complex topic to those who, this may not be a part of their core business. So Shane, tell me a little bit about how do we tailor our stack?
Yeah, so ultimately you may need to consider having 2 stacks, one that is more cost effective but complete, and one that is more fully featured for clients that have higher requirements. Rarely in an MSP environment is there like a one size fits all stack, right? So consider using your stack in risk assessments as well, because you can get some value out of it, right? You can get your foot in the door at new clients. If you have existing customers that are reluctant to talk about security, use your tools and reporting to help open their minds to that conversation. And really, when I'm talking, how do we structure our client conversations to be effective? And I usually find it helpful to break down clients into three groups based on low, mid, or high interest. And for low interest clients, these customers tend to think cyber attacks won't happen to them. They're too small to matter. And so the strategy there is really to deliver some education on the types of attacks and targets. Statistically, most ransomware happens in the SMB space where there isn't as fleshed out a stack. And bad actors know that the likelihood of attracting federal attention is low, which is appealing to them. And most businesses in the U.S. are in that SMB space. It's target-rich environment, and they know that they can play there. And so you want to explain that you often also don't know you've been infiltrated till it's too late. And so ransomware is usually that last step in the attack to monetize the work that they've been doing. Also, again, show those downtime calculators, help them understand the real costs of their business, and really emphasize that everyone is a target, no matter how small, right? For those mid-interest clients, these customers may have been hit before and weathered the attack. We had several of those at our MSP. Their minds are more open to adding things to the stack, but they still want to see value, and it still needs to fit in their budget, right? And so talk about the fact that, once you're hit once, you're more likely to see return attacks. You may have gotten off easy that last time, but each incident is unique, and bad actors are becoming more and more cunning on how to extract payment, right? Most of these professional organizations have multiple paths to payment, encryption, exfiltration of data, and now they're really starting to use even the clients of those customers, if they've stolen that personal data, using it to basically try to extort money directly from their customers, right? And so it's a really difficult thing to recover your public image from when customers are starting to be targeted because of a vendor breach, right? So have some of those meaningful conversations with them around incident response and also around recovery, and maybe a tabletop exercise can be helpful there. And then with our high interest clients, typically these are clients who have compliance needs, so they're already well versed in the threat landscape. And so what you need to do is really discuss what sets your stack apart from the rest of the market. These guys already have a good understanding of the threat landscape. They typically have decent security stack already. And this is usually not a large percentage of your client base, but they can be larger size clients sometimes, right? And so compare the ideal NIST or CIS like to what they're currently doing to find gaps, and really highlight that you have a lot of diversity in your stack between software-based and human-based threat hunting, and solutions that really fit into each layer of NIST or CIS framework, really to help them realize that, hey, maybe my security posture isn't as bulletproof as I might have thought yesterday, right? And so ask how they're also doing offensive-based threat hunting, because we really see that as the biggest gap today within that NIST cybersecurity framework. So some final thoughts here to wrap up. Your stack needs to evolve over time. Be sure you're frequently assessing that effectiveness, modifying it accordingly. Good security is always multi-layered. We'll have method diversity in those layers, meaning like make sure the tools you're using work in different ways with different IOCs, right? And you can take humans out of the equation, you can't take humans out of the equation and expect really good results. You need to have that human element. You need to be constantly training your staff and end users on the threat landscape to be effective. Always look for that balance in your stack as well. It needs to be designed in a way that is affordable, sellable, yet effective. Keep in mind, what we spoke about today really applies not only to your clients, but also to you, right? Don't be afraid to experiment with these ideas in-house first. Be the example to your clients. And I know sometimes it's tough doing that during the MSP life, because I know you're always fighting fires in your clients' networks. But if you really set aside some time to go through this and do an exercise to talk about it, it will be a great investment for you. And it will give you that ammunition to be able to talk to your clients about how it has improved your security posture as well. So Tiffany, do you have any final thoughts as well?
Absolutely. So I'm a firm believer in finding frictionless ways to retool yourself about cybercrime, but also this is a great way to share information with your clients. So find frictionless ways to educate your clients about the threat landscape. This is a great way to build relationships with prospective customers, and this will byproduct, this will be a byproduct to make you that trusted advisor. And so really look for ways to share information with your clients. And just a free tool that we offer every month, we put out a cyber report on the phishing attack. So it's a one pager and it shows you the top 8 phishing attacks. And what you can do is you can download it, put your branding on it, send that to your clients and your prospects. Each month, you're able to stay engaged with them and educate them. And by the byproduct is you're becoming more of that trusted advisor. And so I put a link in the chat on how to sign up for that report. And so I've had a great time. And and Shane, any other thoughts you have?
No, not really. That's it. I really want to thank everyone for joining us today. We know you've got a lot on your plate. We do appreciate you being part of this community and working to keep us all safer. Again, as I mentioned up front, we're going to do some Q&A here at the end. We definitely have some time to do that. I haven't seen many questions there in the chat so far, but if there's anything there, please go ahead and throw it in there and we can chat about it. One question that we got was, how do you get a customer to care about offensive security? Tiffany, do you have any thoughts about that from your side? And I can speak to what we see as well.
So how do you get customers to care about offensive security? The way that we approach it is we help them to, I think you should talk about what you want, how you should be proactive. And it goes back to that impact reporting. So if you're able to, show them that if a breach happens, this is what you lose through risk assessments. Oh, that's a great way. If you can do a risk assessment, or if you could do a pen test and you can show them that there are vulnerabilities, now you can talk about, okay, we're going to resolve these issues, but now let's talk about how we can proactive go about making sure that your users are educated. And so I think really it's all about the impact that will lead into, okay, let's move into trying to figure out what we can set up in our stack that addresses some of those offensive things.
Right. Agree with that. Definitely what we do and what I like to do is really go through our product and kind of show, because we actually have an offensively minded security product at Huntress. And so what I like to do is actually go through and show them an example of an attack that we've been able to prevent using some offensive security. And I think that really opens a lot of their eyes. I think everyone tends to be very familiar with defensive measures and preventative measures, but they don't really understand fully how offensive measures work, right, under the hood. And they want to see that. They want to see how those tools do what they do and why they're different, from defensive tools. And that really helps to drive home the point of like, hey, this is the type of data we're looking at and how it's different, and why it's really necessary. So, and we have some questions here about, so what do you offer? This webinar was really supposed to be more educational in nature. And so, it was mainly about just us being a good part of the community here and getting out some knowledge about what we're seeing as people who've been in that MSP space and security space for a number of years. And so it wasn't really a pitch, but we'd have, like I said, Huntress definitely has our product is designed around being a product that will hunt for persistence in your environment. And we do that looking at auto runs and things that are the auto starting pieces of an OS, and really hunt through that data to see where people are hiding, the people who've made it past your preventative measures. We want to be able to find those people quickly and expel them using real human threat hunting, right? So that's what we do. Tiffany, I'll let you speak to what you guys do since the question was asked.
Right. So Shane, again, the reason why we put on this webinar is we do a lot of coaching at HacWare, just as Shane mentioned, they do that at Huntress. And one of the top questions that we have after we talk about our product is, what are some of the other things we should put in our stack? And so I know from the, the many MSPs that we talk about, they're in this stage where they're redefining their stack. They're trying to think about ways that they can set their stack up so it can address the current landscape and how people are working. But what we do at HacWare, we're focused on, helping you build security education that's automated. It has phishing simulations and micro trainings. And so we focus on the human element, which are the people. But the goal for this webinar is for us to really try to help you understand, when you think about your stack, how you should set it up. And I would love to hear from you all if there's some things that we missed. This could be a great way to sort of collaborate with your community. So if in the chat, if there's anything that we missed that, should be a part of the stack, I think this will be a great thing to share. But if you want to learn more about what we're doing at HacWare, you can go to hacware.com and you can see, how to partner with us and more about our product offerings. Anything else, Shane? Any other questions you see in the comments?
I do not. So
let's see. Hold on. I think I saw one. Someone, just a quick question on IOC. What does that mean? You mentioned quite a few times in the.
Yeah, I mean, IOCs are indicators of compromise. They're really how we identify if something is malicious or not. And there's some databases out there available publicly of IOCs that many different vendors can use, but there's also, some products just use those, right? Other products develop their own in-house. At Huntress, we have our own that we develop in-house based on the data that we're seeing out there that we're collecting from our agent, right? And so what we're looking at there is what can we detect based on that behavior? And that's really what an IOC is from our perspective.
And then the last question, so with all of the cyber attacks that's happening, and so I'll mention, like, last quarter, we saw, back-to-back cyber attacks, supply chain attacks, in October. So in October, that fourth quarter, we saw back-to-back supply chain attacks. And now that we're in Q2, we're seeing more cybersecurity attacks with the Colonial Pipeline and Nobellum and many others. And so now we see that the White House has put in an executive order. Shane, do you have any thoughts on how that sort of impacts the MSP stack with the White House executive order?
I think there's guidelines there. Those guidelines are mainly centered around how, if an organization operates with the federal government, there's going to be some expectations put on, how software is written and how those vulnerabilities, are addressed in that manner. And I think ultimately that will have a trickle down effect to everyone else, right? Because the big boys like Microsoft obviously want to sell to the federal government, and so they're gonna really take a hard look at some of that. And so I think we'll all really benefit from that as kind of a trickle down effect. But as far as independent, is there anything there? I'm not super well versed in, if there's anything specifically that would affect, a specific security stack. I think really those requirements are going to impact all security stacks, right? Because all those products will improve because of that.
Absolutely. It's definitely going to trickle down. I think this is a great time to get ahead of that. So when you're thinking about your stack, and you can look at it from, two different views, a compliance, way of being in compliance with the executive orders and all the things that are going to flow down. But those things are just always the minimum. And so you really need to think about just trying to understand, the threat landscape, finding frictionless ways to understand, how bad actors are compromising systems, and then building a solution that is continuously evolving and changing. And so that's really what's important. Any other questions?
I'm not seeing anything else unless you are, Tiffany. So
No, I think, I think this sparked, I'm always a big firm believer of sparking, a conversation and thinking about things. And then oftentimes I usually get, questions on LinkedIn and other sources where we have those, deeper conversations about something. So I really see, the questions that we had were great. And, if you want to learn more about what we're doing, you can go to hackware.com and you can follow me on LinkedIn, Tiffany Ricks, and I'll be happy to answer your questions and support you in any way we can. Shane?
yeah, absolutely. Huntress.com and my email is shane.rose@huntresslabs.com. And I'm happy to continue and further this conversation with you. If I can help in any way, feel free to drop me a line there and happy to do so. But again, I think we'll wrap up, and I appreciate everyone's time today and appreciate your time hanging out with us, Tiffany, and adding your experience into this conversation. So hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
Thanks for having me. This was great.